Mangaluru Lit Fest 2019, an initiative by the Mangaluru Literary Foundation. The Lit Fest was of the theme, the idea of Bharat, today and tomorrow. We have two eminent personalities who have witnessed both the days of the Mangaluru Lit Fest 2019, Dr. Keonraad, Elst and R. Jaganathan. I now request them to take their positions on the stage. I request our organizers and volunteers to escort our esteemed guest towards the stage. Dr. Keonraad Elst is a Dutch and English author and has also been known for primarily supporting the out of India theory and publication of Hindu nationalist literature. R. Jagannath is a journalist and editorial director of Swarajya.
Yes, hello. I was asked to speak about the idea of Bharat. Now, of course, you know the expression, the idea of India, which is more used by the anglicized elite that prefers the English word India to the native word Bharat. Otherwise, the idea is more or less the same. The term the idea of India was introduced as a euphemism for an absolutely dreaded word, namely Hinduism, or rather Hindu Dharma. So, Mani Shankar Iyer, for example, the Congress ideologue, he used to say, yeah, you know, we have all this pluralism in India, this tolerance, and this is because there is something in the air here that is not in the air in Pakistan that makes us so tolerant, so pluralistic. What he meant in reality, but didn't dare to say, was that this is because of Hinduism. You see, there's no or not much Hinduism in Pakistan, so therefore it is not there, but it is here in India or Bharat. Yeah. Now, I'm going to try to differentiate between these two concepts, Hindu Dharma and Bharat. A yoga master from Jodhpur, Dr. Keonraad Sharma, deceased about 3 years ago, used to come to Europe, and many of these Western yoga enthusiasts are full of India, and they have a very, well, partisan view of India. You know, if you go look at the prepaid taxi stand outside the Indira Gandhi airport, you see them take a taxi straight to Rishikesh. And so they don't see anything of India except the ashram world. So they get a rather unrepresentative view of India. Now, they are very full of India and they refer all the time to India. So Keonraad Sharma said to them, look, you know, India is not that important. India is not Sanatana. India will go one day. You know, it may take a long time before continents disappear, but still, in principle, it is not Sanatana. And so what counts is not India, it is Hindu Dharma. Sanatana Dharma, Arya Dharma. And frankly, I agree with that. You see, over here I see lots of people talking about India, 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 and I understand. But nevertheless, I am more in favor of Hindu Dharma than of India. First of all, India is not my country, whereas Hindu Dharma I feel very close to. And as the secularists always say, you know, Hindu nationalism is something from the 20th century. Before that, there was no Indian unity, and they didn't seek that. That they didn't seek it is not entirely correct. You have already from the Ramayana onwards the notion of a Chakravarti, a wheel turner, that is to say somebody who sits at the center and who has all this periphery around him that is linked to him, just like the circle of a wheel is linked to the center. So that ideal of Indian unification was very much there. And some dynasties came close. like the Mauryas, the Guptas. Then, unfortunately, we must also mention the Mughals and Queen Victoria. And then finally, the Republic of India. Though the Republic of India missed something. You see, with British India, there was a perspective that ultimately they would annex all of the princely states, really unify India. In the case of India, that possibility was eliminated from the beginning by the recognition of the separate state of Pakistan. Anyway, now these many countries in the past with always changing borders within India, with all these different Chalukya kingdom, Vijayanagar empire and so on, they came and went, and yet on the ground very little changed. You see, if some teacher felt like setting up a school in his village, he could do that, there would nobody interfere. There was no Ministry of Education, and there was no state-controlled system of diplomas and so on. Now, that is a big difference between the past and today. In the past, I wouldn't care so much about Indian national unity, what, the RSS and such Hindu nationalists are all for, because, you see, there was cultural unity and it didn't matter whether there was political unity. Now, that today is a bit different. You see, and here the secularists are like babes in the wood. Don't they look at the facts of the modern world? In the past, the state did certain things like to control security and to levy taxes. And otherwise, its presence in people's lives was very limited. By contrast, today, even the most democratic state has far more control over the lives of its citizens than any monarchy or dictatorship in the distant past. So therefore now this unity is quite important. And some people say, we don't want to be a minority, as some Hindus say, but why not? What's wrong with being a minority? Now, if you look in India, the minorities have a good time. In fact, they have a number of privileges that Hindus don't have. And at any rate, they are not discriminated against, they are not oppressed. But then that's India. Here you have the idea of Bharat. Here you have Hindu Dharma. Now, in Pakistan, to be a minority is a very sorry condition. And in most of the Muslim countries, you wouldn't want to be a minority there. So, you see, to prevent that, a strong Indian state is quite necessary. Now, I don't, set much store by that. I was at a conference of the Hindu Jana Jagaruti Samiti a few days ago. I had never been there before. They have the same sort of discipline and uniform like the RSS, but they are also a bit different. And they have a very regimented culture of slogan shouting. So you see, every speech began and ended and was interrupted with or by slogan shouting. Bharat Mata Ki. Yeah. Vande. Right. So I can't really muster that kind of enthusiasm. But nevertheless, in the present circumstances, this strong Indian state is necessary. Therefore, I was as happy as most of you when on the 5th of August, the situation in Kashmir was normalized. Because, of course, you see what we now witness after this disease of Nehruism that lasted for like 70 years, now we see the beginning of a normalization. You see, the situation in Kashmir was totally abnormal. Not a single sovereign state in the world would tolerate a situation where its own citizens did not have access to a part of its own territory. And that, of course, explains partly why no country protested seriously, except Pakistan. The same thing with the court verdict about Ayodhya. You see, this is the end of a trial of 69 years. You would think it is very important, very momentous, and yes, 2 governments have fallen over it, state governments have fallen, hundreds of people killed. A new form of terrorism was launched on 12th March 1993 in Mumbai. So it is, and it had ramifications the world over, like the banning of Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses, was a consequence of a deal by Rajiv Gandhi with Syed Shahabuddin to call off a Muslim march on Ayodhya, and so on. So this was a very important issue. So you would think, oh, this is a very important moment. Well, it's important in the sense that we're glad it's over at last, but frankly, it did no more than restore normalcy. You know, now, in a Hindu place of pilgrimage, the Hindus will be able to do what they want. Now, what's so special about that? You know, are Muslims subject to any limitation in Mecca, or Catholics in Rome? So this is only just normal. And therefore, to complete the idea of Bharat, I would now suggest urgently to keep up the pace of normalization in, well, particularly the constitutional articles that discriminate against Hinduism, they really have to go. You see, this is a total abnormal situation that, except for apartheid South Africa, the majority is being discriminated against. Now, perhaps you come falling from the sky, you don't know what I'm talking about. Some people are not aware that a number of articles in the Constitution discriminate against Hindus. And so I'm not going to go into juridical details of that, but generally speaking, what must happen now is an equalization of all citizens before the law. You see, many people think that India is a secular state. Well, in a secular state, all citizens are equal before the law. Article number 1 of the Belgian Constitution says, every citizen is equal before the law. And so you can just introduce an article to that effect in India, in the Constitution, and get it over with. You know, on social media and so on, I see Hindus complaining all the time that, for instance, recently the government of Uttarakhand has nationalized a number of important Hindu temples, which they could never do with mosques or churches. So yes, Hindus have a right to complain, but since now you have the government at your disposal, it will not do to just complain. Now you can very soon, immediately change that. And since I have the mic now anyway, I want to make a few practical suggestions, because I follow this campaign quite closely. In September there was a conference in Delhi of Hindus who really wanted to make work of this, who wanted to introduce equality in the Constitution. Now, unfortunately, they also proposed some untenable things. Like, for instance, they wanted to also introduce a prohibition on conversions. And they even added the caveat that, but a conversion to Hinduism shall not be understood as a conversion. Now, I don't know if you can sell that to anyone. You know, just when you're saying, oh, we are for equality, just then you're going to burden your case with a plea for inequality. And so maybe one day you can do something about this right to conversion, if that's what you want. But for now, it is very important to concentrate just on equality. Because you see, all the rest, you're going to make a lot of enemies with that. Like, for instance, equality would practically also mean a common civil code. And so, in principle, I'm all for that. Most secular countries have a common civil code. But I wouldn't hurry too much. Because that is something that really hurts the whole Muslim leadership. And you're going to have riots in every mosque in India. So, and the BJP is going to get the blame. And the world over will be shouting, oh, the BJP is intolerant and fanatical and so on, when they only introduce the system that all these other countries already have. So, you see, maybe if you win a third term and so on, you may consider that. For now, I would concentrate on something far more consequential, which is the equality in the law. And that is relatively easy to introduce because nobody can be against equality. I mean, you know, Congress is not going to stand up and say, hey, you know, the BJP wants to introduce ugly, vicious equality. We don't want equality. You know, they cannot say that. So, you know, maybe they will try some explanation, like, for instance, yeah, they say they want inequality, but in reality they want something else. You know, that's something, a rhetorical trick that is often used against the Hindu movement. But you see, that you can defend yourself against. That's not very powerful. So I would concentrate on this very important, very consequential issue, especially equality in education. You know, there is a very important discrimination against Hindus in education. And that's a very important subject because it means transmitting your own tradition to the next generation. And in fact, here too, you can see the difference between the present and the past. You see, schools were not that important in the past. You would like absorb Hinduism everywhere. It would be in the atmosphere. So whether you learned it in school or not was not that consequential. Today they have little else but what they learn in school. So it's very important that you control these schools. And that's not very special because the Christians and Muslims do control their schools, right? And then there is the issue of the temples. That is very complicated because there's a difference between the states. Then there's a difference between the status of the temples, like some are a private legacy from some caste group or from some Maharaja or so. They all have different clauses. Yeah, it's very complex. But at any rate, the general principle should be these temples should be autonomous. They should not be controlled by the state. You know, if it's controlled by the state, it means that money given for religious purposes is siphoned off, either to their own pocket or to secular or even Islamic or Christian purposes. So we don't want that. So there, you know, it is feasible if you really have your heart in it to achieve that. And so for the second term of the BJP government, it would be something to be proud of if that can be realized. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now request our Jagannathan, sir, to address the gathering.
Yeah, thank you very much. To conclude the session, I would like to, at the outset, compliment the organizers of the Mangaluru Literary Fest, that they've done a fantastic job. They pulled it off not once, but twice, and I think it's something worthy of lauding. These occasions are very useful for citizens of Bharat to bond, discuss issues, sort out differences, and build unity. I hope the audience certainly benefited from this, and I would urge all of them in their own way to contribute in terms of time and money to make this festival a bigger success when it comes the third time, which I hope it will certainly do so. I want to start with some of the points he made, but before that I'd make a general point. A happy, prosperous and united dharmic society can only be built on the basis of artha or good economics and a sensible state, which is why the Chanakya Sutra starts with the first three things. Sukhasya moolam dharmaha, dharmasya moolam artha, and arthasya moolam rajyam. So a good society has to be built on economics, which is why I say, do make it a point not just to contribute to all the people who want to build dharmic unity, but make it a habit. Just like when you go to temple, you don't say, I have contributed to the temple now, every time you go, you do put some money in the hundi, right? Make that an important contribution to all dharmic society organizations. Make it a regular monthly habit. Do that. A point about the idea of Bharat. Actually, our constitution says India, that is Bharat. It should have been the other way around, Bharat, that is India. The point is, the reason why we need to emphasize Bharat is because the idea of India has been hijacked by a left illiberal system that has made this country something that it is not. It has thrust ideas down our throats which actually make the idea of their idea fairly abhorrent to the idea of Bharat, which is why we emphasize Bharat. But at some point, the two ideas, the ideas of Bharat and the idea of India, need to merge because the two are one and the same thing. We only hope that the interlopers who ran away with the idea are ejected from Bharat at some point, or at least their ideology needs to be ejected. I've been asked to provide a synthesis of this event, and synthesis actually is the very idea of India. India is not a top-down nation. It was not built from the top down, even though the British like to think they did. We were many different states organizing, but this was a country built from the ground up. As even Diana X says in a book on a sacred geography, the footprints of the pilgrims that go from one place to the other, those are the guys who built the idea of Bharat, the idea of India, the idea of a sacred geography. So it is not a top-down nation which was drawn with a line in the map, which is what Radcliffe did when we divided the country. But this was a country that was built by people going from place to place in search of higher truths, in search of true spirits and sacred ideas. Now, the other day, I think to just sum up some of the key things we saw. Yesterday, we saw a former member of the Archaeological Survey, K.K. Mohammed, who essentially said that if India is still secular, actually a shop-soiled word, secular, should not find any place in the thing. We were always plural, we were always inclusive in a very broad sense of the term, but we shoved in this word. But anyway, I'll use it because that's what it is. It's there after being vivisected so badly. It shows what this country really stands for. And that was an important point to make. Second thing, we also had the governor of Kerala earlier this morning who talked about how actually Islam can merge in some ways. Of course, he tried to say that there is a lot of there in the Quran itself. But I think more than that, I think they need to argue and reason out what is there in the Quran so that the idea of Muslims living in this country can seamlessly merge into the idea of Bharat without necessarily having to give up their faith. They just need to understand what their own heritage is, and that's necessary. That's what it is. We need to move. And another point, some of the other points I'd like to make. The second point of it, I think all these sessions had very good points to make, whether the session on JNU, the session on, where we had two foreigners who took to Hinduism and why they took to it and what made all the difference. I want to do something beyond the Litfest. I think the point to note is that we should not be happy, and I know this is a slightly different point. We should not be happy with just holding this Litfest. I think from here we need to move to an area of action, where I think many of the ideas that we express move to. I would suggest one change in the format of, if you have a future thing, that is take one point that you need to press consistently in India. Like he mentioned, we need to amend Articles 25 to 30, which actually discriminate against Hindus. These are the articles, like in George Orwell's Animal Farm, everybody is equal, but some animals are more equal than somebody else. So Articles 25 to 30 do precisely that. They make minorities they are given special rights, and the purpose was not to give them special rights, but to protect what they felt that was important. But the courts and the law have interpreted it to mean that the same rights cannot be given to the majority community and the so-called majority community. And the majority community, as you know, is diverse. So we need to make sure that there are long sessions where we actually strategize during these festivals about specific things that are important to move the Dharma agenda forward, so that we don't just celebrate some things and leave out what we need to do once we leave this venue. So I think we need to move into that. I mean, Hindu Dharma has been very lucky that without almost any effort on our part, we have had intellectuals like Keonraad, Elst, Ram Swarup, Sita Ram Goyal, and more recently historians like Meenakshi Jain or even Vikram Sampath, who on their own have actually built our case. We have not done enough work of our own, but these people have, at their own cost, time and effort, have done this. I mean, we cannot be so blind as not to see that what we did not do, a lot of these people individually, without no support from the community, have done this primary intellectual work. If we do not carry this intellectual work forward in the next few years and decades, we would be failing them and our own Dharma. That's one thing I would like to emphasize. So I think it has taken us, the second point, that's one thing. So the part of the agenda I said, we need to focus very strongly on changing Articles 25 to 30. The next thing is we have to prepare for the next round of battles, which is freeing our temples. But before we free that, there are several preliminaries we have to do, as Dr. Elst mentioned. I think we do not have a standard for governance of temples. We do not know how we are going to run them. Are we going to run them on the same exclusionary basis that happened earlier, where some castes will control some temples and do that? I think this will be the argument used by the secularists to say why we should not free your temples, because you will again let a small cabal of Hindus run them, and you will say you will not allow Dalits, or you will not allow A or B or C to run the thing. So we need to create standards for governance before we even ask for saying, let's free our temples, let's create it. I mean, the Ram Mandir that's going to be built, if it is built on the right principles, where the devotees have the largest say in how it is run and how it's going to be built and contributed, and not the state, then it would be a good thing. So to keep the state out of the thing, we can't bring them in every time, and we need to create those governance principles. So that's one part of the battle which we need to discuss a lot of. The third thing I said, since we hold this Lit Fest substantially in the South, we need to hold a big North-South dialogue, which is important for Dharma. Many people in the South do not realize the trauma that happened in the North when invasions destroyed all their temples. Why is it that all the best temples in India are all in the South? They're not in the North. The Northern temples are all pathetic replicas of what they were in the past. Even the Ayodhya temple, it had 150 pillars. I mean, they built a shabby-looking mosque on top of that. But the point is, a grand temple was destroyed. Now, if you have to rebuild it, you have to start rethinking on a large scale. I think the North went through a different trauma. The North does not understand the South. The importance of an issue like Sabarimala is simply not understood. People think it's just a political issue, whereas it is so central to understanding some of the tribal cultures that have been integrated into Hinduism and which has its own unique features. It's a powerful temple to Swami Ayyappa. And I think the North needs to understand this. I think the North-South aspect of Dharma needs to be pursued much strongly in future. That's one of the things I would say. And last, of course, I'll emphasize that we need to develop a more consistent support to develop future intellectual capital, a new dharmic historiography that goes away from purely a Marxist interpretation of history and looks at other factors, which is more holistic. Of course, the Marxist contribution is important. We know that economics is important to how a society developed, what happened in history. But that's not the only thing. Man does not live by bread alone, and therefore those kind of things need to be emphasized. And I hope that in future we also emphasize a new development to our own type of historiography, which is far more holistic and not only dependent on a very materialistic interpretation of history. And last thing, I think Dr. Elst also mentioned about conversions. I think we are making a huge mistake thinking that you must ban conversions. Banning does not help you in any way. It might give you a respite for a few years. In China, there are no particular support for conversions, but Christianity is the biggest and fastest growing religion in communist China. And the reason is it is growing underground at a frenetic pace, not because as long as they don't challenge the communist structure, they, even today the Pope kowtows to the Chinese communist leadership. He does not talk to the Dalai Lama precisely because he wants to make sure that Christianity spreads in communist China till it reaches a level of strength where it can challenge the state at some point. So my point is, banning will never help. Hinduism needs to finally say that, look, we need to develop our own system of conversions. We have a strong message, and if you don't want to spread that strong message, then you're going to lose out. A religion that does not grow will shrink. It's the fundamental law of physics, that if what does not expand will contract. So you have to, don't say just stop conversions, because it's not going to help. You have to say, you have to go aggressively into conversions, build the institutions that do that. Of course, this is purely my view. You're free to disagree with it. So these are some of the points in the agenda I thought we should take up in future as we go along into the next Lit Fest. And I hope that this Mangaluru Lit Fest goes from strength to strength, have all the cultural themes that we need, build the unity of Bharat, but also have an action agenda that follows, so that we don't all just go home happy and then turn on our TV and watch the next serial. I hope that we get a lot of time to think about what we need to do, rather than just say that, okay, it was a nice time, a good 2 days, but that's it. So I want this Lit Fest to be a goad to action, to build greater unity, to build focused themes, which we can then pursue for several years till we achieve our goal. That's what we need to do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. We have with us Pooja Jagannathan Swamiji from Sri Ramakrishna Mata, Mangaluru. Mangalurina Swachha Bharatakagi, Swachha Mangalurina Ruwarigalu. Avaru Dr. Keonraad Elst Ravarana Nanapina Kanikiyana Needi Gauravasabekagi Vinantisidene. I would request Pooja Jagannathan Swamiji to present a memento to Dr. Keonraad Elst on behalf of Mangaluru Lit Festival. Can you have a huge round of applause for Dr. Keonraad Elst and Jaganathan, ladies and gentlemen. And that marks the end of the session. We now have prizes. We now have prize distribution, and I would request Pooja Swamiji to do the honors. First place for first standard to fourth standard painting goes to Y. Hamshika. Second standard from Canara Urva. Fifth standard to eighth standard, third place goes to Akshaj from NITK English Medium School. Eighth standard to 10th standard, second place, first place goes to Ananya H from Canara Urva. English essay results. First place, Sridevi K. Puttur. Congratulations to the winners, and thank you, Swamiji. I would now request Captain Ganesh Karnik sir to propose the vote of thanks.
ಆತ್ಮೀಯ ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ನಮ್ಮ Mangaluru Lit Fest na ಎರಡನೇ of the second edition of Mangaluru Lit Fest has finally come to an end. But I think we have made a beginning, and we are moving on to the third Lit Fest in the next year's November month. ನಾನು ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ 2 ದಿನಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಭಾರತದ ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆ, ದಿ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಭಾರತ್ ಟುಡೇ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಟುಮಾರೋ, ಈ ವಿಷಯವನ್ನು ಕೇಂದ್ರವಾಗಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮ ನಾಡಿನ ಮತ್ತು ಅಂತಾರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧ ಚಿಂತಕರು, ಸಾಹಿತಿಗಳು, ಲೇಖಕರು, ಕಲಾವಿದರು ಅವ್ರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾರತದ ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಹೇಗಿರಬೇಕು, ನಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯರ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಗುರುತುಗಳು ಏನನ್ನು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ, ನಮಗೆ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲಿ ತಿದ್ದುಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು, ಇಡೀ ಜಗತ್ತಿನ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಪರಿಹಾರ ಒದಗಿಸಬಲ್ಲಂಥ ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಭಂಡಾರ, ಮನುಷ್ಯ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿಯೊಂದಿಗೆ ಬದುಕ್ತಾ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಯನ್ನು ರೂಪಿಸಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಕಳೆದು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಹೇಳುವಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾರತವಾಗಿ ಎದ್ದು ನಿಲ್ಲಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಬಹುಶಃ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನೇ ನಾವು ಚಿಂತನೆಗೆ ಒಳಪಡಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯವನ್ನು ಆಧಾರವಾಗಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಹಬ್ಬವನ್ನು ರಾಜ್ಯದ ರಾಜಧಾನಿಗಳಿಗೆ, ಪ್ರಮುಖ ನಗರಗಳಿಗೆ ಸೀಮಿತವಾಗಿದ್ದ ಇಲಿಟ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟ್ ಹೇಳುವಂಥ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಹಬ್ಬವನ್ನು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ Tier 2 ಸಿಟೀಸ್ ಆರ್ Tier 3 ಸಿಟೀಸಿಗೆ ತರುವಂಥ ಪ್ರಾಮಾಣಿಕ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಇಡೀ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಂಗಳೂರಿಂದ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಕಳೆದ ವರ್ಷ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ವರ್ಷ ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಸಹಕಾರ, ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ, ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ನಾವು 3rd ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಜಗನ್ನಾಥನವರು ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮಾಡಿದ ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ನಾನು ತಿಳಿದುಕೊಂಡ ಹಾಗೆ 2020 ನವಂಬರ್ ತಿಂಗಳ 7 ಮತ್ತು 8ನೇ ತಾರೀಕಿಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ಕೂಡಿ ಬಂದರೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಎನ್ನುವ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರಾಯೋಜಕರ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥಾಪಕರ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಸಹಕಾರವನ್ನು ಕೋರ್ತಾ ಈ ಒಂದು ಲಿಟರರಿ ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್ನ ಯಶಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಸಹಕರಿಸಿದಂಥ ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಅಭಿವಂದಿಸಿ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಚಿದಾನಂದ ಮೂರ್ತಿಗಳು, ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಚಂದ್ರಶೇಖರ್ ಕಂಬಾರ್ ಅವರು, ನಿಟ್ಟೆ ವಿನಯ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ ಅವರು, ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳಿಗೆ ಸಹಕಾರ ನೀಡಿದಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸರ್ಸು, ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿ ಅವರ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನು ನಮ್ಮೊಂದಿಗೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಂಡಂಥ ಅನೇಕ ಸೆಷನ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿದ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು, ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಯಶಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಸಹಕರಿಸಿದಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರ ತಂಡ, ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರತ್ಯಕ್ಷವಾಗಿ ಪರೋಕ್ಷವಾಗಿ ಸಹಕರಿಸಿದಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲರನ್ನು, ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಕಳೆದ 1 ತಿಂಗಳಿಂದ ಲಿಟ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟ್ನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ನಮಗೆ ಪ್ರಚಾರ ಕೊಡಿಸಿದಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮದ ಬಂಧುಗಳನ್ನು ಮತ್ತು ಮಂಗಳೂರು ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆ ವ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿಯಲ್ಲಿರುವಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರು, ಅದು ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಪೊಲೀಸರಿರ್ಬೋದು, ರೆವಿನ್ಯೂ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಚುನಾಯಿತರಾದ ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್ಗಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಶಾಸಕರು, ಸಂಸದರು, ಅವರೆಲ್ಲರನ್ನೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ಕ್ಷಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಗಳಿಂದ ನೆನಪು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಲಿಟ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟ್ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್, ಮ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಲಿಟರರಿ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್ನ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಆತ್ಮೀಯವಾದ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ದಿ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಭಾರತ್ ವಿಚ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಸ್, ಲೆಟ್ ಅಸ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಅಪ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆನರ್ ದಿಸ್ ನೇಷನ್. ನಾನು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಗೀತೆಯ ನುಡಿಯನ್ನು ನೆನಪು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಎದ್ದು ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಗೀತೆಗೆ ಗೌರವ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಭಾರತ್ ಹೇಳುವಂಥ ಭಾರತದ ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆಯನ್ನು ನಮ್ಮ ಹೃದಯದೊಳಗೆ ತುಂಬಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥ ವಿನಂತಿ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ವಂದಿಸಿ, ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಏಕಗಮನಂದಜಿ ಮಹಾರಾಜವರು ಆ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಭಾರತ್ ಅನ್ನುವುದನ್ನು ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡು ಕಳೆದ 5 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಸ್ವಚ್ಛ ಭಾರತಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಸ್ವಚ್ಛ ಮಂಗಳೂರು ಹೇಳುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವಿಶೇಷವಾದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರೇರಣೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟವರು. ಇವತ್ತು ಈ ಸಂಜೆಯ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಿಂಥೆಸಿಸ್ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರಾಗೆ ಆಗಮಿಸಿ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಆಶೀರ್ವದಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಭಾರತ್, ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ಪರಿಸರದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಹೇಳುವ ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿ, ಅದು ನಮಗೆ ಆದರ್ಶ, ನಮಗೆ ಪ್ರೇರಣೆ. ತಮಗೂ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆಯ ಗೌರವದ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಳಿ ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ವಂದಿಸಿ ನನ್ನ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನು ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಜೈ ಹಿಂದ್, ಜೈ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ.